Hello everyone and welcome back to Backtracking. Let's just get right back into part 2 of the Jimmy Eat World episode as we cover their 6th album, Chase This Light. Released in 2007 through Interscope, it was produced by Jimmy Eat World and Chris Testa, executive produced by Butch Vig, and a dude named John Fields produced the song Here It Goes. When I say Butch was executive producer, I mean that he didn't show up all the time at the band's request. They basically sent him little bits of songs every couple of days and he would help to refine those songs. That alone immediately puts that fear in me, that fear of too many cooks in the kitchen. Ali Butch is the chef that doesn't show up, and John's the guy who pops up just to get paid. So, yeah. I think that leads to my main issue with this album. See, whereas Futures was a good example of sounds mixing together, Chase This Light is not so much. It does contain the first Jimmy Eat World song that I remember liking and Always Be, and that song is a good indicator of this album's sound. It's one of the more mainstream-leaning albums, which I could have easily said about Futures and Bleed American. But this one doesn't fall into as much of a punk style as those two do. It doesn't even seem to have any honesty to it, which is a shame because I feel like the band wanted to put more into this one. There's some experimentation with instruments again, not done to the same degree as Clarity, but I want to knock some good string and keyboard arrangements. But I like experimentation of that type the most when it goes anywhere, a la Clarity and such, but here it doesn't really do that. It feels like the majority of this album is just looking for ways to kill the time. There's way too much filler, and I don't say that because of the style. I feel like the style could have really worked, but it just didn't for some reason, and the band had more control over this album, so is it their fault? Did the other producers hinder them? I can't really find any evidence of the latter. There's also usage of some outside backing vocalists, but they rarely appear and they're either buried out of production or they're there too much. The album has a very bad lack of consistency and has too much going on at the same time. The structure doesn't even have as much meat on it to make up for it, and the lyrics feel far too familiar in places going over love and family and such. The band just lack any honesty, or if they had any, it was stripped away viciously. Jin's vocals sound phoned in, and he doesn't put in as much into his guitar or singing. Tom feels the same, really. Rick's bass can really barely be heard under the roll that's going on. And his last drum just feels lazy, uninspired, and very slow to listen to. Standout songs include the title track, Always Be, Feeling Lucky, Electable, in brackets Give It Up, and my favourite in the closing song, Dizzy. Chase This Light has some bright spots, but it's overstuffed, overproduced, phoned in, uninspired, and very repetitive. That's a good joke for you. I can't recommend the album, sadly. There was so much more that could have been done with it, and they just didn't. We then reached their 7th album, titled Invented. Released in 2010, it would be the band's last from Interscope, and their first since Bleed American to have Mark Trombino producing, with Jimmy Eat World helping too. For context, Mark Trombino's last album with the band to that point was almost a decade previous. Now, about a year before this album came out, the band went on their 10-year anniversary tour of Clarity, making 10 stops in the United States, and playing the whole album, that entire album, at each venue. Also, this album was nearly not released at first. When the band found out that their contract with Interscope was ending, they considered self-releasing the album. That didn't happen, but I thought it was an interesting point to bring up. Another interesting point is that this album kind of has a concept to it. The lyrics were inspired by photographs taken by the likes of Cindy Sherman and Hannah Starkey, and Jim Adkins himself said that he looked at a random picture of either woman's works, then would spend a chunk of time writing about that picture with what he felt was the better stuff being used for the songs on the album. The two main sources that he drew from were Sherman's completely untitled film still series and Starkey's photographs 1997 to 2007. It adds a bit of story, and it's nice to have an outside source of inspiration to draw on like that. Einstein Kills used horror movies, so it's not weird for Jimmy Eat World to use famous photographers' work. And with that concept, there's actually some experimentation with the vocals. By which I mean the female vocalist from Chase This Light actually got to do something this time, so yay! Rachel Hayden and Courtney Marie Andrews helped, with the latter popping up on 5 of the album's 12 tracks, and Tom actually sings lead vocals on the song Action Needs an Audience, the first album since Clarity to feature Tom having a lead vocal role. That's an 11-year gap in itself, but hell, it all works. This album has more cohesion, it's easier to get into, and it's not as insulting as Chase This Light felt. Everything flows a lot better, and it's a huge help to have Mark on deck again. The sound has a more measured approach, mixing Jimmy's tendency to try new stuff with their core sound in a really nice way, and it just feels nice to hear that sort of honesty again. It all adds really well to the overall structure, which is measured but still well paced and with way better tone, and the lyrical inspiration shows well, with more honesty about his messages about love, life, and happiness, and, as mentioned, the concept with the albums, with the photographs rather, just really making it feel really good. And the band all tie it together too. Jim's vocals sound more heartfelt and his riffs and solos sound absolutely amazing here. Tom's own riffs are nice and balanced too. Rick's bass has a good groove and scale here and there. And Zach's drum continues to be well paced and heavy. Standout songs include My Best Theory, Higher Devotion, Coffee and Cigarettes, the title track, and my favourite in Cut. Versatile while staying true to itself, Invented is an easy breeze with an interesting concept and newfound honesty. I can recommend this one. It's definitely a good comeback after Chase This Light. We then reached their 8th album, Damage, released in 2013. It's the band's first through the RCA label, and it was produced by Alan Johannes and Jimmy World, and it's the band's shortest album at 37 minutes and 46 seconds, making it 10 seconds shorter than their debut album. In terms of background, a lot of the process for this one was different. Instead of being done at the band's rehearsal space in their native Arizona, this album was recorded at Johannes' home. Johannes himself, of course, was the vocalist for the rock band 11, and he's now more known for working with Queens of the Stone Age. The band also used Pro Tools and analog tape, so they went with a mix of old school and new school with what they had. Alan himself even appears on the last track on the album You Were Good, providing extra guitar work. Speaking of guitars, a lot of this album's songs were originally supposed to be acoustic, which I wouldn't have been against personally, but I'm glad that they did it the way that it turned out. I think of all their stuff so far, this album, Damage, is probably the most emo-leaning one. For a 10-song album that isn't all that long, the band find unique ways to fill the time. There's some experimentation on hand with some acoustic elements still remaining. You Were Good is a great example of that. According to Tom, Jim performed the song from start to end live without even stopping. There's even a point where an organ was dubbed over to mix in with some guitars on that song. It also proves that Alan added a lot of layers to this album and let the band go at their own pace, something that the band really needed help with at the time. The album does still have plenty of punk energy and the raw honesty that Jimmy World are known for providing. While it doesn't have a unique concept like Invented did, Damage still has a good bunch of stories to tell. A lot of it was inspired by what Jim Adkins saw in the world around him, much as Clarity was. The difference is Jim was 37 at the time of Damage's release, so looking back at it with olive eyes actually helps. This album shows a lot of dynamic similarities with Clarity, but it's a more stripped down version of it while still paying good tributes. I actually really like the approach of this album. It feels a lot smarter and yet short, but benefits from that shortness. The structure has a great pacing, tone, and delivery, and it pulls out some neat tricks thanks to Alan's amazing production. The lyrics contain little stories of their own, about turmoil in relationships and the recovery from that, which makes it more believable to me than just the usual stuff you'd get, which was Jim's end goal at the end of the day. Obviously, the band all perform well too. Jim's vocals sound way better and his riffs and solos are nice and measured. Tom's own guitar work has good riffs of its own and good chugs. Rick's bass shines a lot more with a deep groove and carrying good weight, and Zach's drumming is evenly paced but still hard-hitting. Standout songs include the title track, Please Say No, I Will Steal You Back, No, Never, and my favourite in You Were Good. Damage is honest, surprisingly intelligent, performed well and easy to relate to, and the production is top-notch, unlike my pronunciation of English. I can recommend this album, it's really good. And finally, we reached the band's 9th and final album so far, Integrity Blues, released in 2016 through RCA, which was produced by Justin Meldal Johnson along with Jimmy World themselves. Now get ready for a whole chunk of background with this one. So, in the middle of 2014, the band went on a 10-year anniversary tour of their album Futures, and vinyl releases of that album along with Clarity and Static Prevails were announced too. One would think that would be enough, right? Sadly, no, it wasn't enough until April 2016. Apple debuted an advert to promote a project of theirs, and in the advert was Taylor Swift lip-syncing to The Middle by Jimmy World. Sure, that would sound bad to a non-pop music fan with the famous pop star singing along to the band's most well-known song, but it worked, as because of the ad, The Middle rose to 32 in the iTunes chart, and music site Pandora pointed out that there was a 325% increase in station ads. And that was within 24 hours of the initial ad being posted. So basically, Taylor Swift did something good, probably without knowing that she did something good. She's really probably not watching this, but if she is, well done, Taylor Swift. Well done indeed. And as for the main audience that I have, you can't deny that this works, since Integrity Blues became Jimmy World's highest charting album in the UK at number 21, and based on the sales numbers in the US that week, it was the 10th best-selling album. Not the best numbers, but hell, I'd be happy to freely give a copy of an album with my own music to a hobo if it meant I got publicity from it. What kind of publicity? Oh, I don't know, how about appearing on freaking Conan, or at Reading and Leeds, or performing on a US tour with freaking Incubus. Yeah. I should point out that the album itself is about a minute long, with Taylor lip-syncing along to it for about 50 seconds of that ad. 50 seconds of Taylor Swift apparently equals sudden increase on music sites the next day. What other powers does she hold, I wonder? And should we be worried? Anyway, yeah, this album is again pretty good. Like Damage and Invented, it's a bit more laid back and takes a more measured sound and tone, but it works. Justin's production has a lot of layers of things too. with nice flourishes and additions to the overall sound, giving the album some good stability. The lyrics have sort of a love story concept, although it's played loosely, but it does have honesty and heart to it, talking about love, life, and relationships, and how the band delivered to. Jim's vocals are more soothing and nice, flying well with their honesty, added on to good riffs and solos. Tom's riffs are good as well, with some nice building blocks to the album. Rick's bass is deep and groovy too, and Zach's drumming takes it easy with good timing to it, and so on and so forth. Standout songs include Get Right, Sure and Certain, the title track, You With Me, and my favourite in The End Is Beautiful. Integrity Blues is handled with care, and because of the ad campaign behind it, I hope it rekindles people's interest in the band. It's also well produced, performed, and written, so yeah, I can recommend it. So, let's round them up. I'd have to say my favourite is... It's tough for my favourite Jimmy Eat World album. It's between Clarity and Bleed American, and I think that Bleed American slightly wins out for me personally. It's got the catchier songs, I think, and I like how well it flows, but I could easily try that for Clarity either way, but I just prefer Bleed American slightly more. Least favourite is Chase This Light. It's lazy, it's overstuffed, and drags on for an album that isn't really all that long. Also, fuck the executive meddling on that album, fuck it all, fuck everything. I know, that is being a bit harsh, but I can't be stuck in the middle about my feelings here. That's my one a day. More than one a day. That's my one per episode, I guess. Anyway, I'll see you next time to cover Leeds England rock band, Kaiser Chiefs. As always, thank you for watching. You're awesome. Bye bye.